This is Business Incorporated, and we thank all our viewers in Nigeria and around the world. I am Bosun Namofoye. I'm sitting in today for Chimezi Obiwagu. Welcome to the program. Let's get started. Zambia is delaying the projects to cut debt and woo the IMF back to talks on financing. In Nigeria's Dangote refinery says it's readying the $10 billion refinery for the year 2020. And from the north of Africa, the Horn of Africa to be precise, Djibouti is commissioning a record $3.5 billion Chinese boat free trade zone. And that is where the show looks like today. What are the details? Let's start from the markets here in Africa. Egypt is closed for the weekend. You know that. But the Nigerian Stock Exchange is reversing into the green territory intraday, about 0.1%, keeping those gains it made on Thursday for the Friday, the first Friday in the month in the session. You can see the numbers at about lunchtime, lunchtime here in Nigeria. South Africa GSE index down about 0.66%, sidestepping the Nigerian market, while Kenya market closed in the green on Thursday. That's a snapshot of the African markets. But across in the Middle East, where Friday is a public holiday, the markets are closed already for the weekend, but all green across the major markets from Abu Dhabi to Dubai, to the Qatar and the Saudi market. You can see the number on your TV screen. Saudi, however, sidestepped the rest of the region by about 1%. This is what the European markets look like right now. All red, as you can see. Equities hovering around the flat line on Friday. Investors monitoring developments on the trade front as a deadline for tariffs between the U.S. and China passed overnight, and both countries have fired the first shots. Let's cross over to Frankfurt, where my colleague for DWTV is standing in for Channels Television, Conrad Bilson. Good afternoon. It's good to have you on the program. It's good to get together. Let's get started with the firing of the first shots to start the big trade fight on tariffs. But the markets seem to have played this relatively cool, at least from the Asian markets for today. Mirror the mood for us today from the Frankfurt Exchange, Conrad.
Well, Bosun, the mood is really subdued, I would say. You're right, the markets are playing the bad news relatively cool. The German share index DAX is holding itself relatively well. But as you know, markets, investors had a lot of time to price the bad news in, as the imposition of those tariffs had been really well flagged. The pricing in happened here over the course of the last 3 weeks or so. The German DAX 3 weeks ago traded about 5% higher than it is today. The fact that the market is holding itself relatively well has to do with metal prices. Industrial metal prices have slumped today, but behind this, of course, is the scenario about a potential, slowdown of the global economy. So I wouldn't say that this is a positive driver.
But if we leave the world of the trade fight, as it were, get into the corporate world, JP Morgan and the Industrial Commercial Bank of China, the ICBC, is looking at taking a stake in the embattled Deutsche Bank. How much of this do we know at the moment, Conrad? And do you think this would be a life jacket for this big German lender?
Well, one fact I can give you, the share price of Deutsche Bank is up 3.5% because of the rumors, and this despite the fact that JP Morgan already has denied the rumors. But it is also a fact that in the course of the last few weeks, despite the weak condition of the broad market here in Frankfurt, Deutsche Bank's shares have managed to climb. And a lot of investors, traders here right behind me, are convinced that there was some strategic buying behind this. Maybe JP Morgan, but also there is a case to speculate about some Chinese interest here. And this has to do with the fact that Deutsche Bank's large shareholder HNA has lost one of its bosses in the course of this week due to a tragic accident. Now, as you know, HNA is a large Chinese company that took over many companies in the world, including this large share of 7% of Deutsche Bank. But it paid for this with a lot of debt, and it has a lot of problems to get rid of this debt. And this is where the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China comes in. Both are said to be very close to the communist establishment in Beijing. Also, by the way, the offices of the ICBC here in Frankfurt is very close to Deutsche Bank's headquarters. And all this combined sort of gives fodder to the rumor mills and makes people here believe that something is about to happen.
Something is always about to happen. When you say market here, say, or rumors, as you put it, buy on the rumor, sell on the news. We all know that's how the market plays, Conrad. But in another news, why do you think that the CEO, ThyssenKrupp, is stepping down? Is this part of the move for the merger between this steel company and the Indian Tata?
This is related. Heinrich Hiesinger, who is the CEO of ThyssenKrupp, who announced that he wants to step down, he didn't have the full backing of the supervisory board for this merger of ThyssenKrupp's steel business with Tata Steel. When the supervisory board decided on this about a week ago, Hiesinger only had the full support of the unions, of the workers' side of the supervisory board. On the other side, the capital side members of the supervisory board were not fully in favor of the idea. They did not fully support this. And this is already when people on the market had rumored, well, what does this mean for the CEO if he doesn't have the full backing for such an important decision? What's more, only very recently, another activist investor joined the ranks of the owners, the shareholders of ThyssenKrupp, Elliott from New York. And given that Thyssen already has one great activist investor, Cevian, which owns about 15% of ThyssenKrupp, the scenario became more obvious that Hiesinger would get a lot of pressure from those activist investors who were set to push for an asset stripping of the company as opposed, to a strategy of keeping ThyssenKrupp a conglomerate. This is the base of this stepping down. Traders here are convinced that Hiesinger just didn't want to stand the pain anymore.
Yeah, you can stand the pain of the heat of making metals. Enjoy your weekend, Conrad. Let's get together some other time and continue to track relationship between here and the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Conrad Bussen, my colleague, the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, GWTV for Channels Television.